I haven't left my apartment in 847 days. David's voice cracked as he spoke those words to the camera, his hands trembling around a cold cup of coffee. The blinds were drawn. The door had 3 locks. And somewhere between the fear of dying and the fear of living, he'd forgotten which one was worse. What happens when fear doesn't just visit, it moves in, unpacks its bags, and takes over every corner of your existence? David Chen was 32 years old, a former software engineer who once traveled to 12 countries in a single year. His Instagram was filled with mountain peaks, ocean sunsets, and the kind of life that made people double tap with envy. But that was before the incident, before fear wrapped its cold fingers around his throat and never let go. It started small, like most prisons do. A panic attack on a crowded subway. Then another at a coffee shop. Soon, crossing the street felt like walking through a minefield. His heart would race at the sound of car horns. His palms would sweat at the thought of open spaces. The world outside became a threat, and his apartment became a cage. He willingly locked himself inside. People think fear is just a feeling, David whispered, staring at the floor. But fear is a master architect. It rebuilds your entire reality, brick by brick, until you can't remember what freedom even looked like. His days blurred together a loop of delivery apps, video calls, and excuses. I'm busy. I'm not feeling well. Maybe next time. Next time never came. His friends stopped asking. His family stopped understanding. And David stopped fighting. But what he didn't know was that fear had been lying to him all along. On day 847, something changed. A single envelope slipped under his door-no return address. Just 5 words written in bold. Your life is still waiting. David picked it up with shaking hands, his chest tightening. Who sent this? Why now? And, more importantly, ... what if they were right? What would you do if fear had stolen 847 days of your life? David sat on the edge of his couch, the envelope, the air thicker. He opened the envelope with shaking fingers. Inside was a single photograph, faded, creased, but unmistakable. It was David himself, 3 years ago, standing at the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro, arms raised in victory. David's fingers wrapped around the first lock, cold metal against warm skin. Such a simple mechanism: turn left, feel the click, pull back, a movement he'd performed thousands of times, but always in the opposite direction. Always locking, never unlocking. I'm going to count to 3, Dr. Webb said from the other side. And then I'm going to start talking about something you need to hear. Whether this door is open or closed, you're going to listen. Deal? David didn't answer. His throat was too tight. 1. Dr. Webb's voice was steady, professional. Fear is not your enemy, David. That's the first thing you need to understand. The first lock clicked open. David's hand moved to the second, almost involuntarily. 2. Fear is a messenger. It's your brain's alarm system designed to protect you from real danger. But here's what happened to you. Your alarm system broke. It started screaming at threats that don't exist. David's chest heaved. Sweat dripped down his temple. The second lock was harder. His hands shook so violently he could barely grip it. I know about the accident, Dr. Webb continued. 3 years ago, the subway platform, you were standing 3 feet away when that man collapsed. Heart attack. You tried to help him. You did everything right. But he died in your arms while 100 people watched. David pressed his forehead against the door. The memory crashed over him like a wave of the man's eyes, wide and desperate. The sounds he made, the way his body went still, the blood on David's shirt. You didn't cause that, Dr. Webb said softly, but your brain made a connection that day. Public spaces equal death. Crowds equal danger. The outside world is where people die. And once your brain makes that connection, it doesn't care about logic anymore. It just wants to keep you alive. But survival isn't the same as living, is it? David's mind spiraled back to that day on the subway platform. He'd been heading to a job interview nervous but excited. The man had been standing next to him, checking his phone. Then his face went pale. Then he fell. David had dropped to his knees, yelling for help, pressing his hands against the man's chest, counting compressions the way he'd learned in a corporate first aid course. 1.2. 3. Breathe. 1.2. 3. Breathe. But the man's eyes had already started to glaze over. The paramedics arrived 6 minutes later. 6 minutes that felt like 6 hours. They pronounced him dead at the scene, and David David had walked away, covered in a stranger's sweat and his own trauma, not knowing that his life had just been divided into before and after. The panic attacks started a week later, first during his commute, then at the grocery store, then anywhere that wasn't home. His therapist at the time called it PTSD. His doctor prescribed medication, but nothing touched the core belief that had taken root in his soul. The world is dangerous, and I almost died there too. 3. Dr. Webb said, "Your fear isn't protecting you anymore, David. It's punishing you for something that wasn't your fault." The second lock clicked open. One lock left. David's entire body shook now. His vision blurred. His heart felt like it might explode through his ribcage. Every survival instinct screamed at him to stop, to walk away, to lock everything back up and return to the familiar prison of safety. But Dr. Webb's words echoed. "It's killing you slowly, one day at a time." "I'm going to ask you a question," Dr. Webb said, his voice gentle but firm, "and I want you to answer honestly. When you imagine your life 10 years from now still in this apartment, still behind these locks, still watching life through a screen, how does that make you feel?" David's hand touched the third lock. His voice came out broken, raw, like, "I'm already dead." "Then what do you have to lose by trying to live again?" David's fingers gripped the final lock. This was it. The barrier between everything he'd been and everything he could become. Between 847 days of fear and day one of something else. He thought about the photograph himself on that mountain, arms raised, victorious. He thought about Maya, his sister, who'd refused to give up on him even when he'd given up on himself. He thought about all the moments he'd missed, all the life that had happened without him. And then he thought, what if fear has been lying to me all along? Comment below, what's the third lock in your life? The final barrier between you and the breakthrough you need. The third lock turned with a sound that seemed to echo through David's entire soul. Click, such a small sound, such a monumental moment. He stood there, hand on the doorknob, frozen between two worlds. Behind him, 847 days of controlled safety, predictable suffering, and slow suffocation. Ahead, the unknown, the terrifying, the possible. "I'm right here," Dr. Webb said softly from the other side. "You're not doing this alone." David pulled the door open 6 inches. Light from the hallway spilled in brighter than he remembered, almost painful. And there stood Dr. Webb, a man in his 60s, gray beard, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, holding a worn leather briefcase. "Hello, David," he said simply. No congratulations, no celebration, just acknowledgement. David's legs nearly gave out. He gripped the doorframe, his breathing rapid and shallow. The hallway stretched before him like a vast canyon. Apartment doors lined both sides. The elevator at the end seemed miles away. Everything felt too open, too exposed, too much. "I can't," David gasped. "I can't breathe. I can't." "Yes, you can," Dr. Webb interrupted calmly. "What you're feeling right now, that's not danger. That's courage. Courage always feels like fear at first." David's vision, tunneled, his heart jackhammered against his ribs. Sweat poured down his face. Every nerve in his body screamed the same message. Danger. Close the door, retreat, survive. This was the moment where he'd always turned back before. The moment where fear won. The moment where safety, even painful safety, felt better than the agony of facing the unknown. But something was different this time. Dr. Webb didn't move closer, didn't push, didn't demand. He just stood there, steady as a lighthouse, and said 6 words that changed everything. "Tell me what you're afraid of." "Everything," David choked out. "I'm afraid of everything." "No," Dr. Webb said gently. "Be specific. Right now, in this moment, what exactly are you afraid will happen if you step into this hallway?" David's mind raced. What was he afraid of? That he'd collapse? That his heart would explode? That something terrible would happen and he'd be powerless to stop it, just like on that subway platform? "I'm afraid, ... David's voice cracked. "I'm afraid that I'll panic, and I won't be able to control it. And I'll die right here in this hallway, and you won't be able to save me. Just like I couldn't save that man." There it was, the truth beneath the fear. Dr. Webb nodded slowly, his expression understanding. "David, how many panic attacks have you had in the past 847 days? "I don't know, ... hundreds, maybe thousands. And how many of them killed you?" David blinked. "What?" How many panic attacks have you died from? The question landed like a punch. None. But nothing, Dr. Webb said firmly. Your fear tells you that panic equals death. But the evidence 847 days of evidence tells you something completely different. Panic is uncomfortable. Panic is terrifying. But panic has never killed you. Not once, not ever. David's breathing was still ragged, but something shifted in his chest. A tiny crack in the wall of certainty his fear had built. Here's what's really happening, Dr. Webb continued. Your nervous system is stuck in a loop. It experienced trauma, and now it's trying to protect you by avoiding anything that reminds it of that trauma. Public spaces, crowds, vulnerability. But here's the problem. The more you avoid, the stronger the fear becomes. The more you run, the bigger the monster grows. I want you to try something, Dr. Webb said. Just 1 foot, place 1 foot outside this door. That's all, not to feet. Not into the hallway, just 1 foot across the threshold. David looked down at his bare feet on the apartment floor. 1 foot dot, just 1 foot. It seemed impossible and absurdly simple at the same time. What if I can't? David whispered. Then we try again tomorrow. And the day after that. And the day after that. But I don't think you called me here to give up, did you? David thought about Maya, about the photograph, about the man on the mountain who used to be him, about 847 days of hiding, and how many more days he was willing to lose. He lifted his right foot. The air in the hallway felt different, cooler, less stale. His toes touched the carpet outside his door. His ankle crossed the threshold. His heel left the safety of his apartment. 1 foot in the outside world. David's entire body shook. Tears streamed down his face. His breath came in gasps, but his foot stayed planted in the hallway. I did it, he whispered, voice breaking. I actually did it. Yes, you did, Dr. Webb said, and for the first time, David heard pride in his voice. 847 days, and you just took the first step back to your life. Do you know what that makes you, David? That makes you brave. David pulled his foot back, and hear that was a tragedy. But David, tragedies happen in every corner of the world. And if you let one tragedy convince you that living is too dangerous, then fear doesn't just win, it becomes your entire existence. A train arrived, doors opened, people flowed in and out like water. David watched them, these ordinary people doing an extraordinary thing, living their lives despite the uncertainty, despite the risk, despite the fact that the world can be cruel and unpredictable. I want to get on the train, David said suddenly. Dr. Webb smiled. Then let's get on the train. David's first subway ride in 877 days lasted 3 stops. His heart raced the entire time. His palms sweated. His breath came shallow and fast, but he stayed. He sat in that seat and felt every uncomfortable emotion and didn't run. When they emerged back into sunlight, David stood on the sidewalk and just breathed. Real air. Real world. Real life? How do you feel? Dr. Webb asked, terrified. David admitted. Then he smiled, a real genuine smile. And alive. I feel alive. David stood at the base of a mountain. Not Kilimanjaro, something smaller, more manageable. A day hike in the foothills outside the city, but to him, it might as well have been Everest. Maya stood beside him, tears already streaming down her face. I can't believe you're really doing this. Me neither, David laughed, adjusting his backpack. It felt foreign on his shoulders, like borrowing someone else's courage. Dr. Webb had challenged him 3 weeks ago. You conquered a mountain once. What would it mean to do it again? Not to prove anything to the world, but to prove to yourself that the man in that photograph isn't gone. He was just hiding. The trail was harder than David remembered. His body had spent nearly 3 years in stillness, and now every muscle protested the movement. But with each step upward, something inside him shifted. He passed other hikers, said hello, made small talk. Things that used to be effortless then became impossible, now felt like small miracles. Halfway up, he had to stop, not from panic, from emotion. He sat on a boulder and looked out at the view, the city below, cars like moving ants, life happening everywhere in beautiful, chaotic motion. I almost missed all of this, he whispered to Maya. I almost let fear steal everything. But you didn't, Maya said, squeezing his hand. You fought back. That's what matters. 4 hours later, David stood at the summit. His legs ached, his lungs burned. His shirt was soaked with sweat, and he had never felt more powerful in his entire life. He pulled out his phone and took a selfie, arms raised, just like that photo from Kilimanjaro. But this photo was different. This wasn't the photo of a man who didn't know fear. This was the photo of a man who knew fear intimately and chose to climb anyway. This was the photo of a man who had been broken and put himself back together, piece by piece, step by step, breath by breath. "I did it," David said to the sky, to the world, to the version of himself who'd spent 877 days in hiding. "I actually did it." That night, David sat with Dr. Webb one last time. "So this is it?" David asked. "I'm cured." Dr. Webb shook his head with a knowing smile. "You're not cured, David. You're equipped. Fear will still visit you. Anxiety will still knock on your door. But now you know the truth. You are not your fear. You are the person who chooses what to do with it." "What if I slip back?" David asked quietly. "What if I have another bad day and I lock myself inside again? Then you'll have a bad day, and then you'll have a better one. Because now you know something you didn't know 877 days ago. You are capable of more than you ever imagined, and that capability doesn't disappear just because you're afraid." 3 months later, David received a message from a stranger on social media, a young woman who'd read his story, who'd been hiding in her own apartment for 2 years, paralyzed by her own fears. "Your story gave me hope," she wrote. "If you could do it, maybe I can too. I opened my door today. Just for a minute, but I did it. Thank you for showing me it's possible." David stared at those words and felt something shift in his chest. His suffering hadn't been meaningless. His struggle hadn't been wasted. Somewhere in the transformation from prisoner to survivor to warrior, his pain had become his purpose. He wrote back, "1 minute is how it starts. Keep going, your life is still waiting. Fear will tell you that you're too broken to heal, too damaged to grow. Too far gone to come back. Fear will build walls and call them protection. It will steal your days and call it safety. It will lock you in a prison and convince you that you're free. But here's what fear doesn't want you to know. You are stronger than the stories it tells you. You are braver than the limits it sets for you. You are capable of breaking free, even when breaking free feels impossible." David Chen spent 877 days controlled by fear. But he spent the rest of his life proving that fear doesn't get the final word. You do. So what will you choose? Another day in hiding, or the first step toward freedom? The door. What's the one fear you're ready to face today? Let's support each other in the comments.